Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.
With Steve Lamacq. Steve,
Steve, welcome. Fantastic. And how is lockdown been briefly? You told me the other day that you've been spending a lot of time making things out of cardboard to amuse small children.
Yeah, I've got a 3.5-year-old daughter, so it's been all of a sudden you have to be a Blue Peter presenter, I haven't made as much tat out of cardboard as I have over the last few weeks. Cars, but we did robot heads, anything you can make out of cardboard, we've made out of cardboard, and kept her entertained. Of course, there's the whole world of children's TV programs, which are completely different now to when we were growing up. And we seem to be passed through the Peppa Pig stage, and we've arrived at two amazing programs. I don't know if you know either of these. On CBeebies, there's a program called the Nick Cope Popcast, which is Nick Cope, who used to be in the 90s band The Candy Skins, and now does kids songs, and each episode makes up a song. And not only that, of course, he is I think this is right, he's the son of Kenneth Cope.
The actor?
Yeah, the actor who was deceased, was Hopkirk.
Randall and Hopkirk deceased.
That's right. So he's on CBeebies, and that's very good. But also, have you come across Pete the Cat?
No, this is out of my realm. No,
you're ahead of us.
Teletubbies, I think. Yeah.
Pete the Cat. I mean, it doesn't sound promising, but it's an Amazon Prime original, and it's about so it's a cartoon series with five or six animals. I guess it's based somewhere like California. They're near the beach, but they're young animals, I suppose. I don't know how old they're supposed to be, like late primary, early high school, but they've got a garage band, right? And so every time you need to enforce the moral of the story of each episode, they write a song about it. Excellent. Or they perform a song about it. But here's the thing you need to know: the cast list. So and these are the people who've written some of the songs and sing some of the songs, but Pete the Cat's dad is Elvis Costello.
Wow.
The narrator is Don Was.
Oh.
Diana Krall is Pete the Cat's mum. The wise, not so wise owl is voiced by Phil Jupitus. How about that?
That's a classic cast.
That's not the Banana Splits, is it?
No, it's no. We've moved on. We've moved up.
The future is children's entertainment, isn't it? Clearly,
yeah.
It definitely is. So, have you been indoors then? You've clearly been indoors. You haven't been working normally, or
no? Yeah, right at the start of all this, I had a conversation with a local doctor about something else. But she essentially said the last thing we need at this point is wheezy old rock hacks walking the streets and potentially clogging up our beds. So could you just stay at home for a bit?
You in particular.
Yeah. Absolutely. She did. On a point system, I'm male, 55, and I drink and I have a bad diet and things like that. And it just basically, she said, don't for a while. So I'm going back next Monday. But I've been recording one of the shows at home. Which has been interesting because we've done shows which have started at 8:00 on a Thursday, and with Elizabeth, my daughter's made a couple of appearances because she's just wandered in while I've been recording, and
of course,
But the thing is, rock and roll hasn't stopped, and I'm actually genuinely surprised by how many new records are still coming out and have come out over the past few weeks. I think a lot of bands or artists thought, we'll put this back until this is gone, thinking this will be gone in 2 months. But now, they're thinking, well,
yeah, may as well.
We may as well. Also, record labels, particularly independent record labels, they need the cash flow. You've got to put out records to make money. So,
well, everybody needs the cash flow, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can remember talking to John Peel and him telling. I wonder if there's a parallel between you two, and he was going on about how he had to open up. In those days, it was jiffy bags, wasn't it? Of every single cassette that he was sent, because he was terrified that the one he didn't open up would be the next Undertones, or the next Helen and the Horns, or the next entire crew of the HMS Ark Royal. He just didn't want to miss that. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, partly because of that, I had that same conversation with John, and that was when I realised that John ran on insecurity, really. And I think a lot of us have the same thing, that if it is that one, if you don't, you could listen to 99 tapes, but if the one that you didn't listen to was the one, then you're gonna feel a bit daft, really, and you'll have missed something really good. And these days you can't get to, obviously, I used to bring a whole post bag back, a mail sack each week, and you'd work through it, and by Sunday, if you did about 6 hours, you could probably get to the bottom of it. These days you just can't get to the end of everything you've been sent, because there is so much of it. But you do your best, and there has been a few good things over the past few weeks. So, and it's been nice that people have still been sending us. Obviously it's a lot easier now that people can send you links to tracks and stuff, but there's been a one or two. Our only problem at the moment is I generally work on the theory that I won't really properly go, I won't be over enthusiastic until I've seen that band live. And at the moment,
that's not going to happen.
That's not
moments to come. Yeah, it's going to be hard to actually judge whether some of these bands are really, really good or just good, or bad masquerading as good.
Well, it may lead to a totally different sort of band emerging. The bands emerged for live circuits, band emerged for recording. We're now in another dimension, aren't we, really? Of people going to find other ways of presenting themselves.
Here's a terrifying thing as well, because all these records are coming out. Now, there will always be certain records that you can make at home in your bedroom, and I know some bands can record remotely these days. But we will get to a point where, with all these records coming out now, there'll be a drought, because bands won't have been making records during this point. So we'll get to the point where there's no more records to release. Think about that. An album drought.
But I often think, whenever I look at Netflix, I always think, well, if Netflix was not joined by any new films for the next 3 months, would it really make a lot of difference? Because there's so much to catch up on there.
Yeah.
Never get near. And I suppose similar things apply to records, but although it doesn't help you in your case. Now, you're spending time. Are you in your attic there, Steve? It looks rather nice. Is that your library or your attic or whatever?
It's what I call my office room. So this, when I moved in, this was the front room, but it's the downstairs room. I've got a loft upstairs, which I had to convert because obviously I ran out of space for records and all my CDs and general tat down here. So there is a loft upstairs. The loft also doubles up as the homeschooling nursery at the moment, which is why I'm down here. But this is most of the stuff in here is stuff from my youth, and everything up till about the late 90s, I think, and everything after that is upstairs.
Are you quite old?
Have you rediscovered any stuff that, particularly from your youth, any kind of first records you ever heard or anything?
Well, yeah, I mean, because I don't have a lot of time to listen to old records because there's so much new stuff, I don't get a chance to listen to a lot of albums. But usually it's happened over the past few weeks, but in general, once every week or once a fortnight, I'll have a late night singles binge. So particularly recently, so you finish with your work and your childcare for the day, and after Elizabeth's gone to bed and my wife will probably go to bed, and I will pour the vodka and Coke, and I will just sit here with piles of singles, because you know how badly wired our brains are as music fans. So it will start off with something like Elizabeth getting dressed and my wife saying, "Oh, that's a pair of fancy pants." Fancy Pants by Kenny. And it turns out I don't have a copy of Fancy Pants by Kenny, but I do have The Bump by Kenny. And then you look at Rack Records and you think, I've got loads of stuff on Rack Records. I scooped up some of the 7-inches from the other night.
Oh, brilliant.
So and there is Cat Crept In by...
Cat Crept In by Mud. What a great record.
Cat Crept In by Mud.
Used to be lonely. Used to be a joke about the cat crept in, crapped and crept out. I don't know if that was just rattled round the smash hits officers at the time. But anyway, sorry, carry on.
Does anyone remember Tony Blackburn by Binky Baker?
Oh,
yes!
Mr. Annie Nightingale.
He's Mr. Annie Nightingale. He never appeared without a pair of spectacles with little tiny windscreen wipers on. And I remember you used to look at pictures of him and think, that must get very irritating to live with that man. I'm not sure if he still does, actually. He was a kind of prankster, wasn't he? He's never happy at them and putting boxes full of bricks on the top of doors so somebody opened them there. Yeah.
Really?
That would get tiresome.
Here's a weird one. Right. This is by a band called the Innocent Vicars. Right, and when I went I left school, went to college. I studied journalism at Harlow Tech. It was the National Council for the Training of Journalists 1-year course. And on the first Thursday, a few of us went out to the pub to try and get to know each other. And I got talking to this fella Greg, who became my best mate at college. Despite the fact we had nothing in common musically, because at this point around '83, I was listening to the Newtown Neurotics and Attila the Stockbroker, and punk bands like the Verucas or Peter and the Test Tube Babies and stuff.
Yeah.
And he only liked Bob Dylan. Nothing else, just Bob Dylan.
Well, if you're going to pick one, it's quite a good one to pick.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give him that. And in the end, he was the man who won me over to Bob Dylan. And I bought my first ever Bob Dylan album that year, which was Infidels.
Did you win him over to Peter and the Test Tube Babies? Probably not.
I won him over, to be fair, I won him over to the Newtown Neurotics. But weirdly, we're having this conversation about where we came from and music and stuff. And I said, yeah, I've got this. He said, because he came from near St Albans. And I said, I've got this record which came from around there by this band, the Innocent Vicars. And he knew the Innocent Vicars, although they were at his school. And that's actually how we bonded over our love of this obscure single played twice on the John Peel show. But weirder still, years down the line, and this would have been in the 90s, the dance music producer, writer, Richard Norris, came on the show. And I thought, I know that name. And I went back and Richard Norris,
there he is.
Very, very young Richard Norris, was in the Innocent Vicars. Weird.
There's no hiding from your past nowadays, is there? Since Wikipedia or whatever. You used to be able to bury a previous musical life, didn't you? And nobody would ever know about it. You can't do anymore.
You used to be able to arrive as a completely kind of fictitious concept. Now people just Google you and say, actually, you're a middle-class student from the London School of Printing. And your father is the Archdeacon, wherever.
There's a couple more. This one, this is the first Idlewild.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
I mentioned this because, and again, it still happens now, and I really treasure it when people send you a record, but particularly when they write to you. I mean, a lot of bands these days, even very young bands, employ radio pluggers, which seems to put something in the way of you.
It does. You're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So nothing better than inside
the handwritten letter.
Dear Steve, here is a copy of our single as requested. Thanks for coming to our gig. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll hopefully be down in London again soon. But at the moment, we're trying to get a gig in the city, which is in Glasgow this year. Aside from that, we're just rocking hard in Edinburgh and Glasgow.
And it's written, it's on lined exercise book paper, isn't it? As well.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's very much we had this around the house.
Yes, yeah. So do you keep stuff in a very organised way, or do you just happen to hang on to certain things?
Certain things I'm quite a hoarder, and then you have to go through and have a bit of a cull every so often because you just run out of space, so you take things away. But letters and old press releases I've always put in the sleeves.
Right, yes.
So
the press releases they occasionally flutter out of my LPs, and my God, they take you back. Some long gone press officer and some old kind of paper they don't even make anymore. And you think somebody typed this out in the United Artists Press Office in 1974.
And they're all full of those wonderful cliches, aren't they, about a kind of hard-gigging quartet from Cirencester. Yeah. And you always know the PR who wrote them, and you can remember it so vividly.
Yeah. What I always liked and used to make me laugh, and we used to get this when I worked on the local paper. I did the music page on the Harlow Gazette. And the stuff that you would get, they were very. So this is not even top range press officers. These are just people who think this is how a press release reads. And the line that always used to get me was, "They have been compared to U2. Who by? Who's compared them to U2? Bring them here. I'll tell them they're wrong."
And in what way? That they're a 4-piece group, and that involved in live performance.
It's also the rather touching idea that you would read that and you think, well, I'll give it a listen.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that at all, does it?
Yeah, not at all. One more single, which actually I came across while I was looking for the Mud singles, and this is probably one of the rarest records I own. That is the very first Manic Street Preachers single.
Wow.
Which is before Richie was officially in the band, hence there's only 3 of them on the sleeve.
Yeah.
And
do you keep your eye on
to which you are kind of completely connected, aren't you? Forever.
Yeah. I mean, it's strange how well we get on these days. And actually, talking of press offices, the thing which brought us back together after the famous Richie interview, the famous interview with Richie Elvis, was when Philip Hall died.
Right,
and it just seemed like all petty arguments should be put aside because there were more important things in life.
Definitely.
So bless him for that.
Do you keep you're legendary for the number of gigs you go to? Do you keep a record of those?
I used to. In fact, one of the things. Here's a thing. One of the things I have found is this. Now, I don't know where the others.
When's that? 1989.
1989, and basically, it's pages of this. So it's just gigs, basically. I'll read a few out to you here. So anyway, it's basically just all the gigs that I had in my diary, and I've ticked the ones which I've gone to, and. So right at the start of the year, I didn't go to a gig until the 4th of January, Kiev Exocet.
You lazy son.
I know.
On annual leave. That's right, yeah.
And here's the thing. There are bands in here which I have no recollection of going.
Well, you wouldn't. How many did you see in 1 year? How many did you see in that year? Have you got a tally?
I think this one is about. I think this year is 170 something. The previous year.
That's incredible.
The previous year, I got to 197, and it weirdly, because it obviously carries on from the previous year. You might just be able to see this. There's an entry for Ghost Dance at the Marquee.
Right.
Ghost Dance, who are slightly more produced All About Eve or something. They were the goth bands who tried to cross over, and I was on that was my 197th gig of 1988, and it was so awful and depressing, and I had such a bad time and never went out again that year, and I still blame Ghost Dance for not making it to 200.
They're the band who kept Steve Lamacq in.
Yeah.
If any member of Ghost Dance is watching this in the unlikely event, they're going to feel terrible.
That's the most 197
gigs. I know 197 gigs is roughly, if I'm working this out, it's 4 a week, isn't it? 4 a week, every week for 52 weeks a year.
There are occasions here where, obviously, in those days, when there were lots of venues in Camden, you could easily do 2 a night.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could.
They moved them near each other just for your convenience.
Yeah.
That's how they worked out. How long would it take Steve Lamacq to get from here to here?
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, and this is. I mean, in the old, you could start off really early at the Marquee, and then just get on the Northern Line, get on at Tottenham Court Road, and you could be in Camden to see the second band on, and then you could go to Kentish Town for the third band on, and they've done 3 in a night. But it's interesting watching, I suppose watching bands develop. I've got, I saw the Mega City 4 an awful lot, I can tell you that. But this, somewhere here, there is a so the 29th of September, I saw a band called Ride supporting the Pop Guns at the Falcon. And then on the 16th of October, which is my birthday, I saw Ride again at Harlow Square. And this all before they had their first record out, which was start of 1990. So this was off the back of the demo, which I think I've still. Oh, look, here you go. I knew I got it out somewhere. That's the Ride demo, the original Ride demo. But yeah, there are bands in here.
Would that be worth something? It must be, mustn't it?
I don't know. I mean, because the thing is, I don't know how you authenticate it, because it looks like a standard cassette with a sticker on it. And I don't know how many.
Which is not that thrilling, is it? Yeah.
No, not really. But it's.
But I would have thought, Steve, given your kind of bona fides, you would be in a position to provide what's known in the kind of rare items trade as provenance. So anybody can, sell an autograph saying this is Winston Churchill's autograph. But if you happen to be somebody whose father worked with Winston Churchill, your version of it is probably quite valuable. Whereas, I mean, I'm imagining you don't spend a lot of time on Discogs or all these sites online where people keep a track of the price of ancient items. You don't bother with that at all.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I go on there when I'm looking for odd records. I don't know if you've done this, but there was obviously a period around, I suppose, from 13 to 16 where I didn't have enough money to buy all the records I wanted, and I have gone back and filled in the gap. And some records are, I mean, they're virtually being given away, and you think that's brilliant. And some of the records which I couldn't afford at the time are now astronomically expensive. I mean, some of the
give us an example of what.
There's a band called again, one play on John Peel probably. There was a band called Straw Dogs, I think, and had a track called "We Ain't Dead Yet." I mean, I like it because it reminds me of the time, and it was quite a good tune. And but it's a very rough and ready, classic, buzzsaw punk song from the time. But the last time I looked that up, that was well over £100 for a single, which.
Well, you see, I suppose that in those days they would have pressed like 500 copies. Really minimal numbers.
Yeah, so those rarities, and there are punk collectors from all over the world who are real completists, and that is why I think the prices have gone up for some of these records. I mean, not the mainstream records. You can pick up the UK subs for 20p probably, but some of the more obscure records, even though some of them have ended up on compilations, there've been numerous reasonable box sets over the last 2 or 3 years, but people just, they want that vinyl. It was very strange myself. I did a compilation box set myself last year called Lost Alternatives, and these are records, and it's only the 90s, but it's amazing how many people.
I've got it over here, Steve. I'm gonna get it and plug it. Hang on a second.
Thank you very much. But the interesting thing is how many people don't have the master tapes, and the bedroom indie labels that put them out have vanished. No one knows who owns the rights to them, and brilliant. There you go. There it is. So I went purposely for some records that weren't on Spotify, but that gave us a real challenge. And the reason they're not on Spotify is because no one knows who owns the rights to any of them. We had to master 4 of the tracks on that off the CDs, which I have, because the tapes are long gone, because the labels are long gone. And
you see, I think you're right. That's what happened with things like Robert Johnson, King of the Delta Blues Singers, which came out in the 60s, didn't it?
Yeah.
That was all mastered off records because there clearly wasn't a tape in the first place. So, whoever had the rights, they'd been passed on, or somebody had lost them, or whatever. But you're absolutely right, because I'm actually putting together a similar thing of 70s gems for the same company. And there is the odd thing that's just completely disappeared off the radar. And the people chasing them down, they know what they're doing. They're very expert people.
Yeah.
But it's a dead end.
I love the fact as well that I think we got to a point with some of the Creation stuff, and although Sony bought out Creation, when they bought out Creation, they found that there'd been no paperwork for a lot of the bands. So even though in theory they own it, they don't own it because they haven't got a bit of paper saying.
Why is that a surprise that Creation Records, the most chaotic place I can remember ever having to deal with, that there was no paperwork?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, McGee was Dick Green was brilliant, wasn't he? But McGee was the salesman. He was the front of house, wasn't he?
Definitely.
He used to take journalists out for lunch, and he had a flat at one point near Creation, I think. And then you would be taken back to the flat, and you sat down on this settee. Whoever he was plugging at the time, he'd put their tape in, play at astronomical volume, and you just sit there and go, yes, okay,
I give in.
But you basically kidnap journalists, play this stuff at them, tell them how, and it'd always do that thing where you go, did you get it right? Did you see it?
Didn't he do the same thing with Noel Gallagher pretty much when he met him? He took him back and just played him all his old B-sides, didn't he? He said, this is music, this is the stuff.
It's a very record company thing to do, though, is to play music at such a volume that you cannot compete with it at all.
No,
you can't express any point of view. They just want to beat you
into submission. Yeah.
You just smile.
It always reminded me of. Do you remember those adverts they did for? Was it Memorex or something like that? And they had Pete Murphy or somebody.
Pete Murphy's hair blowing back.
Max L, I think.
Max L, that's it. And it was like exactly like that.
Yes.
Yeah, G-force.
Yeah, it's a cartoon wavy line. Your scarf going back. That's right.
That's exactly it. I'll tell you something. I know people have brought some of these on before, but can I just say, because obviously the thing is, I've got one. So when I had the loft done, and I was trying to work out, where everything was going, I put in the plans a cupboard specifically for music papers and magazines, which is now obviously full. So every so often, again, you have to go, well, I'm going to have to get rid of some of these. I'm sure some of this stuff I don't really need, but and I will be keeping these, but there you go.
That's brilliant. When it was still a monthly, that's worth a few bob.
I don't think I've got that one.
Well, also,
I've got that, and I think I'm right in saying that the cover story for that is either just the lyrics of Blondie, Blondie's new single, or it's something like you can win 10 Blondie albums. I mean, don't think there's any editorial at all.
No,
that's the story.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 people listed on the staff list.
Well, there would only be one. It'd be Nick Logan and Chris Hall, who was Nick Logan.
Chris Hall was Nick Logan, so that would be,
But the thing is, what I'm really gutted by is, because I know that wasn't the first one.
There was a test one, wasn't there?
There was one with Plastic Bertrand on the cover, which I've got.
Which is only circular. Oh, there you go.
I've got it too, just over there. How funny, that's amazing.
What are the dates of those 2 then, Steve? What are the cover dates? One's September, is it?
Yeah, September 78. Blondie is November 78.
Okay. So, right.
But there is...
okay. Plastic Bertrand was the test. It was just done in the northeast of England, I think I'm right in saying.
Really?
Well, because you used to be able to do... I don't think they're back to a TV advertising. I can't remember, but it used to be when people used to test market things in Britain, they always did them in the northeast because it was a relatively easy area to target, apparently. I don't know why.
I think so. Something. Now, by this point, David, you're features editor, so I'd just like to know.
Yeah, I'd like to complain.
I'd like to complain because
I feel time to vent my anger.
I filled in the crossword and sent it off to win a copy of the Skids album,
and you didn't.
And I never won a copy of the Skids album. There, look, cut out, done the whole thing.
Oh, really? And you must have sent it off to an address at Orton Southgate in Peterborough, I would have thought. So it wouldn't have gone anywhere near me, Steve. So
really? Okay. You're not to blame.
I'm not to blame for depriving you of Into the Valley. But have you got old enemies and things like that? You've kept that?
Yeah, enemies going back to, I suppose, about 79, 80. My entry into the world of music papers was Record Mirror probably about, I used to buy a Record Mirror in about 74 when I first got into music, and I was obsessed by pop music. I mean, it's true that in age 10, 11, that's when I first wanted to be a DJ, because I just used to listen to Radio 1 in the summer holidays, because I grew up in a tiny little village. I mean, the current census, my mum and dad still live there. There's 1,003 is the population of the village.
Which were the DJs you were listening to then?
So at that point, whoever
Radio 1 DJs,
Radio 1 DJs. I didn't discover Peel until 78, maybe something like that. So I had some music papers from around about 74. I don't have those anymore, but I do have all the Record Mirrors from around about 78, when obviously I missed the first wave of punk because I was just a bit too young. But it was records like Do Anything You Want to Do by Eddie and the Hot Rods and Stranglers, Tom Robinson, 2468. all that stuff, which I suppose reminded me of the classic era of the glam rock, which I liked, was what got me back into music. And then obviously all, you know, you were just buying singles all the time, and there were just great records coming out every week during the summer of '78. Was amazing. So Record Mirror, and also I was obsessed by the chart as well. I was just obsessed by charts. I used to, obviously you'd run home when I was at primary school. I used to run home to hear Johnny Walker on a Tuesday lunchtime, revealing the chart. Later on, you'd buy Record Mirror, have the whole top 75 in, and I was obsessed by that. But more importantly, by, I guess, certainly '78, I would get up on a Saturday morning, and despite living in northeast Essex, you could just about get Capital Radio. And so I'd get up and listen to Peter Young and the Capital Countdown, because the chart in London was miles ahead of the rest of the country. You would have all these obscure reggae imports and things that were massive in London, like, you know, Steel Pulse, all the reggae records, Clash imports. The top 40 in London at the time just seemed so exotic and exciting to somebody who was growing up in a tiny little village. You know, you couldn't be more removed in a way from the thing that you obsessed about. So the music papers were sort of my life, really, and then Record Mirror sounds enemy.
Have you read Pete Buffeedy's fantastic book Broken Greek, which we've been talking about quite a bit? I mean, I guess you must have read it. I mean,
I haven't yet. No.
Oh God, I think it would appeal to you so much.
Yeah, you would. You'd love
it. You're roughly the same age, and it's just that whole thing about the glam singles he used to listen to when he was a kid, and his obsession with the charts is the same. Something that you then transfer to football, you know, or simultaneously have about football. Yeah. Oh, you love it.
Well, obviously, I transferred my love of underachieving pop bands to a love of Colchester United.
Colchester!
It's true. Supporter of the underdog, aren't you?
It took half an hour, but we got to the subject of Colchester United. Yeah. How are they getting on during lockdown? How's things looking?
Well, we've got a pretty good chairman, actually, who's put a lot of money into the club and has been reasonably sensible. I mean, you know, we're just waiting on whether the league ratified the plans put forward by League Two clubs, which is to just play the playoffs at the end of the season to see who goes up. And if that happens, we are in the playoffs. It's been another up and down season. Always is. You know?
A down and down season.
Well, as I always say to people when they say, "How long have you been supporting Colchester United?" And I said, "Well, since 1983. What's that? 37 years through thin and thin."
Well, that's the truth. That's the truth for most football supporters. You know, as Nick Hornby, I think, wrote in Fever Pitch all those years ago. He said, "The natural state of football supporters is disappointment, no matter what the score." And I think there's a lot of truth in that. Steve, it's been lovely to talk to you.
Brilliant to talk to you.
Thank you.
That was absolutely riveting. Brilliant. Thanks for doing it.
For inviting us to your attic, and people will look forward to hearing you on the radio again soon.
Thank you. Thanks, boys.
Cheers.
Take care.
Excellent.
See ya.
See you,
later.
Steve.
Bye-bye.